I'm down here in my basement just kind of riffing a little bit about some things that happened in the last week in the YouTube hip hop community. I want to talk about like why am I the way that I am on Culture United? I want to talk about the biggest personal public embarrassment of my life. I want to talk about the hypocrisy of people calling Kendrick a hypocrite, and I want to revisit my Playboy Cardi and Kendrick take a little bit. But let's start off with the Culture United thing. So taking part in Culture United is like one of my favorite things that I do. Every single time I'm invited, it's kind of random. I never know when it's going to be. I'm always excited. It's always a huge deal for me. And whenever I read the comments, it's very funny because very often it'll just be like, Sky, speak. Bruh, what's Sky doing? Is Sky on drugs? Sky looks high as F, okay? Or high AF? I don't know what you kids say. But that's what everyone says. First of all, I don't do drugs. But what is it? Why do I look that way? Why do I not talk as much as you might think I do, considering that I get on here and just riff off the dome for like 50 minutes with no editing 3 times a week? Well, there's a couple reasons. One, my lighting rig is just too intense. My wife, God love her, she got me this great setup, and it's just the lighting is too much. Everyone's there. Curtis is there. He's all cool with his awesome lighting. And Justin's got his professional thing, and I'm just all lit up. So I already look kind of weird with the lighting. So I need to put that. But really, it's that I'm always trying to balance stepping lightly and being invisible. Like, how do you step lightly without allowing yourself to be erased? Now, why would I want to step lightly? Obviously, I think highly of myself, or else I wouldn't have a YouTube channel where I just talk about what the hell I think about, right? Well, listen, there's a couple of good reasons. One, like these are my heroes, okay? Like FT Signifier, I think is like one of the greatest and most important people on planet Earth. I know that sounds ridiculous, but I'm serious, okay? Like I understand that, I don't know, John Cena is more famous and draws more attention or whatever, but for me, thinking about like what do I think a human being can do on planet Earth, I don't think anyone can do better than what he's doing. So like, does he interrupt me sometimes? Yeah, he does. But what am I going to do? Be like no. So that's one aspect. I mean, like I'm sitting there talking to Open Mike Eagle and Justin Hunt, Curtis. You know what I mean? So that's one aspect. Okay, and then the other thing is let's be honest. This is a very consciously black space. It is Culture United, so there's always representation, or representation of different races and all that. But it's important that one remembers, if you are a white person in that space, that that you the same way that you are a visitor in the world of hip hop, you are a visitor in that space. And so if you're going to try to be, the term I always use is tourist, if you're going to be a good tourist, don't just sit there on the metro screaming English as loud as you possibly can, right? This is further complicated by aspects of my brand. So part of my brand is that I am thank you for auditing, Professor Sky's Record Review, the always positive new music review show, hosted by a French professor. I am a tenured French professor. That's a big deal. That means I have a lot of education. I'm a father of 4. I'm a middle-aged white guy in the suburbs who has an authoritative job, okay? Part of my brand is that institutional authority, which is cool. I worked hard for it, okay? I worked really hard for that authority that I have. But also, again, not everything gets boiled down to race, but race is a part of everything. That kind of power, that kind of institutional power is not distributed equally, okay? So if I kind of use my professorial blah, it doesn't make me feel comfortable to be the same kind of Professor Sky in that way. Okay? And this has been complicated by the fact that last week, I think last week was my best and worst week on Culture United, okay? I mean, this week it was complicated by the fact that I had a lot of answers for a lot of the things we were talking about, and you've been watching me, you know what they are. I basically boiled down almost everything that we were talking about, this systemic racism. Okay? Ye is a problem, but let's be honest, he's a scapegoat. He's been a scapegoat for larger systemic problems. Okay? I think the way we talk about Kanye cannot be erased from the way that we marginalize black voices and black celebrities. Okay? I don't think we can talk about Ye without talking about the story of OJ by Jay-Z, as an example. All right? That doesn't mean he gets a pass for what he does, but it does mean that that's a part of the conversation. Same thing with is Kendrick a hypocrite? Same thing with Cardi. So what am I going to do, my friends? Tell me the truth. Am I going to get on a platform and explain systemic racism to historical victims of systemic racism while being somebody who benefits from that same systemic racism. Okay, that's a spicy pickle. Okay, that's like what I'm not going to lecture them on their lived experience as represent. You know what I'm saying? You understand this kind of like weird, complex thing? You know, optics, it's funny because I talked a lot about optics. It was ironic because I spent a lot of time talking about optics while I did the worst thing of optics in Professor Sky history, which I'll get to in a second. So it's fascinating because, you know, I have to straddle this line. And that's why the Cardi thing works so well. You know, talking about Cardi, thanks to Omar for setting me up so well on that. Like, I was able to make an argument, a provocative argument based on my own thinking and my own idiosyncratic vision, and I was able to defend it, and I was able to really get into the spirit of everything because we were just having a sweaty dorm room discussion, like FD Signifier talks about. I was just able to be in that space, and I was really happy to be there. So I'm always trying to find this fine line. I talked to Curtis maybe last week, Curtis King last week, 2 weeks ago. I was on his channel, and he sort of said, you know, Sky, you know, you need to talk more on Culture United. And so I think I did, and for the better with my Cardi take, and then for the worse. Now, you want to know the worst? I did something wildly stupid, okay? My name is Professor Sky, but if you want to call me Professor Dumbo, that's also okay, all right? How did I feel? Dumbo, all right? The event I'm going to talk about is over. I did something, frankly, not cool. Not good. And truly, it's over. I'm not canceled. I'm a little bit embarrassed. I was half expecting, I don't know, a deleted video. Sky. None of that happened, okay? I was called an idiot and racist by a few people, but like when you screw up as bad as I did, when you're as culturally insensitive and just dunderheaded as I was, that comes with the territory. And what that taught me was that, like, there's a lot of grace in this space. We talk a lot about cancel culture and all that. And I was laughed at, sure. I was laughed at by the members of the panel. I was questioned by the members of the panel. I've been watching some awesome reaction videos. I really suggest you watch Therapy. I support Therapy for a long time. He does really great stuff. He laughed at me for like 3 straight minutes, just laughing and laughing and laughing. And listen, I deserve all the smoke. I'll take it. Read my soul, look right at the camera, and talk to me. And I happened to be watching, so I responded back. You know, I got flamed in some comments, but in general, I was shown a lot of grace because, you know, I try to be a good ally. I try to teach other white people how to be good allies in good spaces. I try to be a good guy, and I put a lot of effort into it. And so I got a lot of goodwill, and I think I might have spent it all, okay? So it was over. It was over. It wasn't clipped. I wasn't getting in trouble, okay? So why make a video, Sky? Why make a video now? Because I don't think I want it to be over. I think I want to talk about what I learned. I think I want to talk about the learning process and maybe teach others about what I learned and what you can learn. My wife, who is, let's be honest, smarter than I am, said this: being smart is not what you know, but what you are willing to learn. And I think that is especially important when you are in any space where you need to consider yourself an ally. Being an ally is not a fixed state. It moves. It has to move. It has to evolve. And if you just say, I'm an ally, fold your arms, and think everything that you do is covered in the blanket of allyship, then you are going to turn around and find yourself not an ally. Okay? That's a thing I learned this week. So let's talk about what I learned this week, okay? We were talking about Kanye West. All my problems in life start when I start talking about Kanye West. I can't help it. I still think he is the greatest genius of our time, and I understand he's a problematic person, okay? I had a point that, as far as I could tell, I'd watched the people, I was on the panel and I'd watched their videos on this. I thought, well, I'm going to make this point, and maybe other people hadn't made it, which is that, you know, really, he's flirted with racist imagery before, and people basically accepted it. They did not push him that hard. And that you can really see, and this is not I'm not the first person to say this, but I don't think anyone was going to be saying this on the panel. He is always pushing people away. He is always trying to stretch the limit of what an artist can do. How much can an artist have no audience? How much can an artist be hated by everybody and still be an artist? He's been doing things to isolate himself for years. And the example that I gave happened to come from you see the poster back there. Okay, that's the poster of the Yeezus tour that I saw in Toronto, with Kendrick Lamar opening. And they in the middle of this tour, in the middle of the concert, they said, and look, there's Drake. I'd never even heard of Drake at that point. I wasn't paying attention to music, you know? So I was there, and there was that poster for sale, and I bought it. And there's also this other interesting object. A flag, a bag with a Confederate flag on it. Now this is 2013. Okay? And it was already a little scandalous. I remember people talking about it a little bit online, but it was not at all the conversation that we're having now. So I thought maybe if I brought this up in this group of just wildly smart and interesting people, that this would be a lead to an interesting conversation. Like, why was it that this was basically accepted? Is it because he had the benefit of the doubt, that he had a lot of grace and he hadn't used it all up yet? Was it that he was less racist? Was it that, because he was using imagery that reflected racism against his own person, right? Like, maybe that makes it different, or maybe people are just more cool with anti-black racism than they are against anti-Semitism. Okay, these are all questions which I thought might be up there, right? So it seemed like a powerful object to discuss, this Kanye West made Confederate flag bag from 2013. We are talking Yeezus era. This is even before Pablo. This is before Kim. This is before North. This is before Fuentes, okay? I thought, what a fascinating thing. This is going to lead to such a great conversation, because it seemed to me that this, in parallel with the Black Skinhead song, was fascinating. I mean, even you don't remember, but maybe you remember, Black Skinhead is a shocking title. It's a shocking title, and he was using that term, and he was playing around with that imagery. And I thought maybe we would even lead into a conversation about the fact that Kanye's been using fascist skinheads in his videos. The video for Carnival has actual skinheads in it. I don't know why no one's mentioning it, or very few people are mentioning it. Maybe they don't know enough about skinheads, but they actually are. So how has it changed? Has it changed? What does this all mean? Is there artistic merit? It's provocative. It gets the people going. All right, so all these things were what I was thinking in my big boy brain that I got up here, that the great people of California helped me to obtain a doctorate in 17th century French literature in California, the University of California, Santa Barbara, okay? This big brain was thinking all these great ideas, okay? And what I realized was, objectively, I didn't have a problem with somebody who is a descendant of enslaved people, somebody who is a descendant from victims of segregation, co-opting a symbol of American slavery and segregation. That's what the stars and bars, that's what the Confederate flag represents. So to me, that was the interest of the object, all right? If a Northern Irish singer used the Union Jack, would I buy that? Hell, I just thought of this when I came downstairs. Back over here, you see a painting of Michel Duvalier, the wife of of Baby Doc, one of the worst dictators in Haitian history. And Makami, who is of Haitian descent, made that poster. Similar idea, like reclaiming or recouping or co-opting these images. If a Jewish artist made a piece of art and used a swastika, would it be wrong? It would be provocative, it'd be offensive, it would be interesting, and that's the kinds of questions that I was thinking. So I was thinking that maybe we could have this kind of conversation about Ye's positioning right now, okay? So that was the idea. All the things I just said, that you know how if you have like 1,000 numbers, like 1 billion numbers, and you multiply them by 0, the number is 0? If you take all that smart thought, Professor Sky, Professor Dumbo, and you multiply that by 0, you are a dumbo. You are a dumbass, okay? You are an insensitive dumbass, because I brought out the bag. I bought the bag in 2013. I bought the bag and the poster, okay? And I was a dumbass, an insensitive dumbass, an unintentionally disrespectful dumbass. I lowered the space to go into my storage space. I climbed up those stairs. I moved a box. I went into my box labeled Kanye merch. I put aside the Kanye perfume, the Kanye coloring book, the Kanye cell phone case, and I grabbed the Confederate bag and I brought it down and had it next to the microphone, sitting there like Professor Dumbass like I am. Justin even unintentionally set me up by saying, Sky, he's the guy with all of the props. And I said, oh, you're not going to like the prop I'm going to show now, because I knew it was going to be, I was so dumb. I thought it was going to be an interesting thing. I didn't actually think about it. And then I did it. And then I brought out the flag, okay? Me, a frickin' white guy on a majority black panel pulling out a Confederate flag as a surprise. I had a point. I wasn't trying to be offensive. I was trying to be provocative. But Sky, my dude, how stupid are you? What were you possibly thinking, Sky? I'm talking to you, the me that's watching this video tomorrow, whenever I release it. Like, what were you thinking? I was casually showing off a symbol of hate. Just casually. That's what I was doing. And there's no way around it. I've given you the explanations, but there's no excuse. It's just not a good thing to do. That's what I did, and it was a bad thing to do. And I apologize to all the participants, Screw, Moni, Justin, Fantano, Omar, Curtis, and viewers, and anybody who, when they see that sign, and when they see that symbol, feels uncomfortable or targeted or bad, all right? It's not, my wife said, Sky, don't make an apology video. That's what she initially said, because like you'll just be looking for reassurance. I'm not looking for reassurance, okay? I'm not looking for reassurance. I've gotten reassurance, Like we went on and had a wonderful panel and we had a nice conversation, right? And no one's coming after me. I've got all this grace. I'm not doing this because I have to. I'm doing this because I think it's a really important lesson for my fellow tourists. Now, I did a video recently about how it is to be a tourist in hip-hop space, and this is a good example of what not to do. And what's the number one lesson I give on how to be a good tourist in hip-hop spaces? Don't get too comfortable. Don't get too comfortable. I don't care if this is the 6th time you've been on the show, Professor Dumbass. Don't bring out hate signs, okay? Maybe don't do that, okay? So, I deserve all the smoke I've been getting. It's been hard to stomach, but I'm really happy for all of this goodwill. And I think it has an interesting, I do think it is, someone said in one of the comments, this is my 37 moment. So if you don't know the story, What's the Dirt is a Canadian, person, seltzer salesman, who made these videos about the beef. And everything went wrong for him when he pointed out that Drake said the N-word the number of years that he was alive, and drawing the conclusion that he's doing that to say that he has been that for as long as he's been alive. Justin reacted to that, and that was where things went really south. I don't need to summarize that. Go watch Justin's videos on it. They're great. Go watch Deleted's videos on the Pack Out. It's great. Awesome, awesome, awesome stuff. Great work. Fascinating example of the importance of gatekeeping. And most importantly, when I saw that, I didn't understand it at first. I was like, it's a goofy point, but I don't think it's offensive. But then every single black commentator that I saw commenting on it said, you know what, this is not cool. So what's going to be your response? If everybody with a lived experience tells you that something makes them feel bad, are you going to say, no, it doesn't? Or are you going to say, oh, I didn't know. My bad. Right? And that's what it was. I thought with all of my big full brain of just so many neurons flying around so eloquently, dancing, doing little pirouettes like Bo walking above the above the basement. I thought it was cool. I thought it was fine. It wasn't. I was told it wasn't. And you just have to say, okay, it wasn't. When people tell you what's not okay, if it pertains to their lived experience, the only answer is okay. And that goes for anybody. Now, while this was happening, I didn't understand how bad it was while it was happening. It's fascinating. Like, I've watched it again, and it's painful, but it's interesting. And Moni, who is one of the an amazing truth teller and amazing communicator, amazing participant in Culture United. Her channel, Chilling with Moni, is a great channel. I support it as much as I can. I think you should watch it. She does great commentary work, great cultural work, just amazing, amazing. But it's pretty spooky when she turns it on you and she said, well, why'd you buy it? And I wasn't ready for that question, so I want to answer that question now. Okay? I don't expect her to be watching. I don't even know if I'm going to release this, frankly. If it ends up being too self-serving, I'm going to have my wife watch it, and then if it's too self-serving, I'm just going to say thanks for watching it, honey. Okay? But why did I buy it? Why did I? And look, I'm not going to hang it up because I don't have that thing anymore. Goodbye. I'm either going to destroy it or throw it away or give it away. I don't know what I'm going to do with it, but I'm never going to show it again. I am never going to hold a Confederate flag again. Okay? Why did I buy it? Okay? There's the truth, and then there's the deeper truth. The deeper, uncomfortable truth that I have to face right now. So the truth is all that collector stuff I'm talking about. The same reason I bought the Duvalier painting, print by Makami. Okay, the same reason I got the poster. All right, I'm a collector. I love collecting things. It was an odd object. I thought it fit with a black skinhead thing. Again, that was fascinating. But then there's the deeper truth, the uncomfortable truth, which is what Moni didn't even have to say anything. She didn't even have to explain herself. She didn't even have to go on and say all the things I'm about to say. All she had to do was ask that question. Why did you buy it? 5 words that forced me to completely reconsider my actions and thinking about this object that has been hiding in a little box in my attic. Okay? Because let's keep it 100. Would I buy a Union Jack made by an Irish artist? Probably. Would I buy a swastika from a Jewish artist? No. Why? Why, Sky, were you comfortable with the Confederate flag? Some people call this a mask-off moment. I generally don't like that because it's often a part of like kind of groupthink. But it was a mask-off moment, not the question. And the best mask-off moments, Tyler the Creator will tell you, is in front of a mirror. So I've been sitting here, why did I buy it? It can't just be that it was an interesting object. It's because it was an abstract for me. I'm a northerner. I don't come anywhere. I don't ever see the stars and bars ever in my life, okay? My family is just northerner, okay? That doesn't mean that my family did not indirectly benefit from the slave trade like all Americans did. Of course it did. Our country was built on forced labor, all right? Of all sorts, all right? But like, the abstraction to me meant that I was comfortable with this object of hate. And that makes me uncomfortable, but it's true. It's true. That's why being an ally means never being still, not only because things change, but because you have to really analyze what are the things about you. Why was I comfortable? Even though I hate the Confederacy and the slavery for which it stands. Even though I stopped watching Dukes of Hazzard when I learned what a Confederate flag was. There's no way I would have bought that if I lived in the South. If I had grown up in the South and I had seen that, if I was from, I don't know, South Carolina or Georgia or any place where they've been fighting over the state flag, all that, I never would have bought it. But I thought it was okay. And that thinking it was okay comes from a place of privilege and fundamentally comes from me accepting a certain amount of systemic racism, the same kind of systemic racism that I am trying to fight every single fucking time I talk on this channel. It is me failing in a real way to live up to my own beliefs. And all I ask is that if you are ever lucky enough to have somebody confront you in a kind, open, and clear way like that, if you have a Moni in your life who says, why did you buy that? Figure out the answer. You know, I had this big idea of what it was going to be like, and it wasn't that. It reminds me of, I went to camp. I went to this weird camp once, and they did these things called the Olympics at the end of the session. And you had to sign up, and I was late to sign up, so the only thing that was left was diving. And I thought, how hard can it be to dive into, there's like a little lake at the camp. How hard can it be to dive into the lake? So I signed up for diving. So I put on my swimsuit, I go out there, the entire camp, a couple hundred kids is around there watching, the judges are sitting at the podium table. I step on to the platform and I realize I have never in my entire life jumped into a body of water. Not feet first, not head first. I barely knew how to swim. I learned how to swim when I was like 10. I'm still not a good swimmer now. And I signed up for diving. And I didn't even do a belly flop. I walked out, got so fucking scared, and I just kind of crumpled into the water and then had an asthma attack, and they had to swim out to save me. Okay? That was the equivalent of Mr. Big Brain Professor pulling out that flag. So anyways, I hope that was interesting. I did want to talk about the hypocrisy of Kendrick question. There was comedy at the end of Culture United where I'd been sitting there waiting to talk, and I had my point, and I was ready to say it, and I was finally ready to like stake my claim. I said, can I say something? And then FD cut me off, and then he talked for 5 minutes, and they said, I have to go, and then Fantano said, I have to go, and then Screwface said, I have to go. So like everybody left, and then I made a joke about it, and I said, can I talk? And then Justin's like laughing, haha, and then he goes on and talks about how great the conversation was. And then I watched Derapy's stream, and he cuts it off right there. And then I watched Read My Souls, and he cuts it off right there. I had this point, and if you watch the video again, it's hilarious because I'm sitting there for like 15 minutes sitting on these ideas, trying to make points. And I just can't get them out. And even when they're rewatched, my points aren't watched. It is a very funny, comical thing. I think in Reed's video, he said, yeah, that's what you get for showing the flag, which is totally fair. But I'll just share the points now, just because I think it's interesting.